so hello dears! Ayan. Alright, wait, muna siya ako siging entrance no. Ngayon kung hello dears sila makatawa, char. Okay, anyway, alright, so hello dears again. Welcome to another pre-recorded lecture in our class in Clinical Parasitology Laboratory. And for this lecture, what we're going to discuss now are the different parasites that you can see in your blood smears. Okay, so we have discussed na the different methods on preparing your blood specimens for parasite examination. Now for this lecture, what we're going to focus now are the parasites that we can see. So actually, again, I think you're done now with this in your lecture class. So I'm confident or I'm expecting na lang na this will be a review, alright, or supplementary na lang to what you already know based on what the Queen, Ma'am Bruna, has taught you in the lecture, no, when it comes to the blood parasites, alright. So yeah, still the same reason with fecal smears, no. So I want to mention this, or I want to discuss this because again, it's important for us, in the laboratory to identify them. How do we identify them, and what are the parasites that we can expect or that we can see from the blood? Okay, so medyo again, same rin siya og format with your parasites in fecal smears na discussion and handout. Alright, but now we're focusing on blood. Okay, and this is our second to the last lecture. Our last lecture will be immunoassays and hapit na gyud. Alright, and we're done with clinical parasitology. Char, sentimental drama lang. Okay, alright, I'm gonna miss you dears. Char. So you won't miss me. I know naman. Char, sad boy. Anyway, alright, so again, these are your parasites and blood smears. Again, medyo baka TMI, but again, I would expect that this is a review now because you're done already with this in your lecture, okay? Alright, so parasites in your blood smears. Okay, now, blood examination, as mentioned diba, in our previous lectures, blood is considered to be the second most common submitted specimen in the laboratory for parasite examination. Why? Because the second largest number of parasites is found in your blood. Okay, diba? Pinakadaghan yun na parasites, or the most number of parasites that we can see, or the specimen where we can see a lot of parasites, is your stool, and then followed by your blood. Okay, so we'll focus on the blood. Alright, and blood examination, routine diagnostic method, of course, for malaria, for filariasis, African trypanosomiasis, and babesiosis. Okay, it can also be used in Chagas disease and rarely in Kala-Azar and toxoplasmosis. Alright, so we'll focus on those parasites later. Okay, alright. Now, blood parasites again can be of wide range. They can come from a wide range of group of parasites. They can be protozoa. Most of them are protozoa. They can also be trematodes, and also they can be nematodes. For cestodes, we have tissue cestodes, your echinococcus, diba? Those are tissue cestodes, but they don't necessarily infect or invade your blood, okay, for cestodes. Okay, alright, so most of the time, these are the major groups where you can see blood parasites. Okay, alright, now again, since, diba, flow chart, kay mahilig na ng mga flow chart. Okay, alright, ayan. So for blood parasites, again, we have three major groups. For protozoa, of course, they're now subdivided into your flagellates, okay? And these are known as your hemoflagellates or your blood flagellates. Yes, you're done with that. Which includes your Trypanosoma species and Leishmania species, okay? And then you also have your sporozoans, of course, you're also done with that, which includes your Plasmodium species, the causative agent of your malaria, and of course, Babesia species for babesiosis. Those are for protozoans. Next, we have also Toxoplasma gondii. Now, for Toxoplasma gondii, I won't discuss that na. I think na-discuss na ni Ma'am Bernal po. So, toxoplasmosis, no? Toxoplasma gondii. They can also be transmitted sa blood. They can also infect the CNS, the central nervous system. And usually, we get this from your cats, diba? Mga iring, yes. Mga cats, and the feces of your cats. Okay, alright. So, again, pinapobaya ko na kay Ma'am Bernal yan. Okay, I think, yeah, she discussed it already and okay na. Okay, alright. And for your helminths, of course, we'll start first with your nematodes. Starting first with, of course, your filarial nematodes or your filarial worms. Okay, and your Dirofilaria immitis. Now, Dirofilaria immitis is quite the same with your filarial nematodes. And Dirofilaria immitis, again, I won't be furthering the discussion here because, again, I think Ma'am Bernal discussed it already. And again, it's not that common, if I'm not mistaken. No? But for Dirofilaria immitis, is also known as your dog heartworm. Okay? And once it affects the humans, of course, within itself, it affects the hearts. And aside from that, it can also transfer or it can also infect the lungs. And in the lungs, they form what we call coin lesions. Ayan, press the buzzer. Coin lesions in the lungs. So, ang lungs, iyahang gamaan og lesions in the shape of coins. Okay? The lungs will have lesions similar to coins. Okay? Coin lesions in the lungs, Filaria immitis. Also known as your dog heartworm. Naku, press the buzzer. Lumalabas ang words. Okay, alright. Ayan. So those are for the nematodes. And lastly, for trematodes, your schistosoma species. Now, for schistosoma species, we have discussed that already in parasites and fecal smear. No? They reside in your blood vessels, diba? So that's why they can be found in blood. Okay? But their eggs, their characteristic eggs, their characteristic ova can be found either in stool or can be found in urine, diba? So, kinsa ito makinan sa stool, you have Schistosoma mansoni, Schistosoma japonicum. For urine, kinsa man ito sa urine? Schistosoma hematobium. That's why we will not be discussing schistosoma here because we're already done with that, okay? Makabalaw na schistosoma. So, balik-balik. Anyway, alright. So, what we're focusing now in this lecture are the flagellates, hemoflagellates, your sporozoans, except Toxoplasma gondii, and your nematodes, your filarial nematodes. Okay, alright. And that will be the first type of parasites that we're going to discuss, your blood nematodes or your filarial nematodes. Okay, now what are these blood nematodes? They're again also known as your filarial worms because they cause the disease known as filariasis. Ayan. We're almost done with parahas. I hope you pronounce it correctly na. Iasis, filariasis, no? Trypanosomiasis, babesiosis, okay? Ascariasis, okay? Alright, ayan. So filariasis. So it's usually most of them, if not all, are transmitted via arthropod. Okay, so it's a vector-borne disease. Okay, so these arthropods can be your mosquitoes, your midges, or your flies. Okay, and your filarial nematodes, they infect your subcutaneous tissues, your lymph nodes, yes, mga lymph vessels, alright, but they start from the blood. Okay, because again, the vectors will inject the infective stages of your filarial worms into your blood system or into your blood vessels. Okay, and then from the blood vessels, they now migrate. They go now to the different areas in your body, especially specifically your subcutaneous tissues, connective tissues, body cavities, and of course your lymphatic system. Okay, adult worms in the tissue, they live in your lymphatic system, but their larvae, known as your microfilariae, are detected in your blood. So your microfilariae goes out into the blood system. Okay, mag-swim sila there. Okay, they can be detected in your blood specimens, your microfilariae. And usually these are the diagnostic stages for filarial nematodes, the microfilariae. Okay, alright. Ayan. They exhibit also what we call periodicity, meaning this is the time of the day where they are in most numbers or they are in great numbers in your blood. Okay, so these are periodicity. Ayan. Parasites are present in this bloodstream at this time in greatest numbers in a specific time period lang in a day or within the day. Alright, and we have different types of periodicity. First is diurnal. By the name itself, they are present in great numbers during the day. Okay, mga buntag, no? 10 a.m. to mga 2 p.m. ganun. Alright, diurnal periodicity. You have nocturnal, by the name itself, sa gabi noon sila, so mga night owls, mga party people. Okay. Gusto nila mag-party, mga mahilig sa tiki racer, okay, so mga nocturnal, so sa gabi, sila alive, yes, okay. And you have subperiodic. When you say subperiodic, the timing is not clear-cut, it's not really established kung morning ba dyan sila daghan or sa gabi ba dyan sila daghan. Okay, so it would depend. Okay, or subperiodic, it's not clear-cut ang kanyang occurrence. Okay, alright. Now, what's the importance of this periodicity? It's important because once we know that this is the type of filarial worm that this patient is experiencing, we already know what time to collect. Okay, we will know what time to collect the blood sample because we know that at this time of the day, the parasite is in great numbers in the patient's system. Okay, because this parasite exhibits diurnal periodicity, or this parasite exhibits nocturnal periodicity, or it's subperiodic. It's always found. Okay, or some of your filarial nematodes also, they don't exhibit any periodicity, so non-periodicity or non-periodic, meaning they can all be found in your system, in the blood, at any time of the day. Okay, that's non-periodic, meaning wala siya periodicity. The parasite can be found in your system any time of the day. Okay? Alright, ayan. So that's the importance of your periodicity. For laboratory technicians or for medtechs, we know what time to collect the specimen because we know that at this time of the day, the parasite is in great numbers in the patient system. Okay? Alright, ayan. That's for periodicity. Alright, and two characteristics usually for speciating and differentiating the species of Microfilaria. We look at its morphological characteristics, starting first with the distribution of nuclei within the tail of the Microfilaria, and lastly, the presence of a sheath. Okay, the presence or absence of a sheath. A sheath is an outer covering, delicate transparent covering. Alright, the sheath comes from the egg when it was still during the egg, no? So, diba? Adult filarial worms, they produce the eggs, no? And then, if they retain the egg membrane, that becomes the sheath, okay? So, the covering of the egg, diba? Egg, after egg, they become Microfilaria. Okay, now, if the Microfilaria retains the egg membrane, that now becomes your sheath. But, if they rupture the egg membrane, okay, so wala na yung sheath. So, there's absence of your sheath. Pronounce it correctly, ha? Sheath, dilish. Okay, dapat may PH. Sheath. Okay, sheath. Alright, okay. So, it's an outer covering, but the name is of sheath, diba? Alright. Okay, so those are the initial introduction to your filarial worms. Now, we go now to your habitat. Again, as mentioned, for adults, they live in your lymphatic system, except for your loa and Oncogenica volvulus, which reside in your subcutaneous tissues. And for your larvae or Microfilaria, they reside in your blood, except for Oncogenica pa rin. Your Oncogenica, they live or reside in your subcutaneous tissues. Okay. Final host or definitive host is the man. So, kita ang gihimo nilang hotel para dito sila magpadaghan, mag-mate. Okay? Alright? And the intermediate host is your mosquito usually, or other arthropods na mga insects. Okay. Alright. Diagnostic stage, as mentioned, is the Microfilaria, and the infective stage is to intermediate host, meaning to our mosquitoes, meaning sila yung paak na to, or the mosquitoes will bite us, or when the mosquitoes or the arthropods bite us, what they get is, of course, the Microfilaria, but the infective stage to us, to humans, is your filariform larva. Okay. Alright, because again, in the body of the mosquitoes or in the body of the arthropods, the Microfilaria that they ingest from humans will transform into filariform larva and then to adults na mga filarial worms. Okay? Alright, so later we'll look into the life cycle, diba? But generally, they have the same life cycle for all species of your filarial worms. They differ in the areas of in the body, where they infect or invade, or the vectors that they use. Dito sila mo differ. Okay, alright. So mode of transmission, again, for the rest, for all of the species of your filarial worms, bite of an infected arthropod. Okay, alright. Ayan. And we have what we call an endosymbiote. Okay, endosymbiote. This is a bacteria known as Wolbachia species in any appearance. It's an alpha proteobacterium. Okay, alright. So medyo maliit siya na bacteria. So it's alpha proteobacterium. Now this bacterium resides also in the filarial worms or in the surroundings of the filarial worms, because these Wolbachia species, they promote development of the larva, viability, and also fertility. This endosymbiote, okay, by the name itself, it's a symbiotic bacteria, diba? Symbiotic, so meaning it contributes something to the filarial worms, and the filarial worms also contribute something to the endosymbiote or your Wolbachia. So it's a mutualistic relationship. Okay. Now these Wolbachia again species, please take note, malabas sa boards, is the endosymbiote for your filarial worms. And where do they use it for? They use it for larval development, viability, and also fertility. Okay. Now these, that's why treatment for filarial worms, filarial nematodes, they also include antibiotics against this bacteria, because aside from drugs that really target your filarial worms, they also include drugs that will target Wolbachia. Because again, about two birds will be hit using the drugs, because mamatay na the filarial worms will be killed, and aside from that, the endosymbiote, the bacteria which also helps in the development of your filarial worms will also be killed. So therefore, it will make sure that the filarial worms will be really killed because there will be no endosymbiont to support its growth, and the filarial worms itself or themselves will be killed. Okay, so muna siya combination of the anti-filarial worms drugs and also the Wolbachia, drugs against the Wolbachia. Okay, please take note of malabas sa boards. Okay, alright. Ayan, okay, so those are some introduction. Okay, now for the life cycle, which is common to all. Okay, so first is of course, diba, intermediate host, infective stage to us humans is your larva, filariform larva. Infective larvae are injected by the arthropod vector upon blood meal. Once inside the body, inside us, the larva migrate to the tissues where they complete their life cycle. First, they become adults, no? And then of course, male and female, they become fertilized and they lay your Microfilariae, okay, which take up residence in the blood or dermis. And lastly, Microfilariae exit the body again via a blood meal of another arthropod, and the cycle goes on. Okay, so infective larva, L3 larva ang mapunta nato, okay? And these larvae will develop into adults. The adults will mate. They will produce your Microfilariae, and the Microfilariae will now, spread in the blood, in the system of the patient. So once another arthropod vector bites us or bites the patient, then of course they will get now the Microfilariae, and then the cycle goes on. Okay, alright. Ayan. So that's the cycle. And species affecting man, we have 5. We have, first is the Wuchereria bancrofti or bancrofti. You have Brugia malai. You have Oncogenica volvulus. You have Loa loa, and of course, lastly, the Mansonella species. Okay, alright. Now we'll go through each of that individually. Starting first with Wuchereria bancrofti. Your Wuchereria bancrofti is also known as your Bancroft's filarial worm. It's the more prevalent, and it's also common in the Philippines, and it's considered to be the most common identified species of filarial worms around the world. Okay, so it's the most common filarial species that infect humans. Okay, it has nocturnal periodicity, so meaning we collect blood during this period of time, 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. Nocturnal, so gabi. Night shift siya, night shift. Okay. Mahilig mag-party, party peeps, ganun. Okay. Alright, may nightlife, sana all. Okay. And the vectors, as you can see, are female mosquitoes, Aedes, Anopheles, and even Culex species, diba? So, in your public health, you already know how to identify mga larvae of mosquitoes, diba? Pass na jukuan. Char, I'm done with that. Okay. So, again, vectors, female mosquitoes. That's why it's common in the Philippines because we have the vectors, okay? It's very common, the mosquitoes, very common in the Philippines, diba? That's why we have this filarial worm because again, the vectors are common here. Okay, alright, ayan. Next, the Microfilaria, how do we describe? It's sheathed, it has a sheath and pointed tail, but wala siyang nuclei sa tail, okay? Alright. The disease is also known as Bancroft's filariasis and elephantiasis. Ayan, diba? Ang daming iasis. So, Bancroft's filariasis and elephantiasis, the adults reside in your lower lymphatics. Ayan, nasa ilalim sila. Lower. Maayos siya mo party. Night shift, kabal ko siya mo lower. Okay, so, lower lymphatics siya. Lower lymphatics. Okay, alright. That's why, before we go there, for Microfilaria, diba, as mentioned, it's sheathed, pero wala siyang nuclei. So, Wuchereria, wala. That's my mnemonic. Okay. Wuchereria, wala siyang nuclei sa tail. Okay. Wuchereria, wala siyang nuclei at the tip of the tail. Okay? Alright, please take note. Mnemonics natin. Wuchereria, wala siyang nuclei at the tip of the tail. Okay. Alright. Alright, okay, so mnemonics now, just sharing. Okay. Alright, so now for the disease, again, filariasis and elephantiasis. Now, what is elephantiasis? Elephantiasis is a chronic condition. Because of the chronic presence of your filarial worms in your lymphatic system, it causes now proliferation of dermal and connective tissue and also fibrosis of the skin, alright, which leads to a wrinkled, dry appearance of your extremity, which looks like an elephant's leg. Okay, that's why it's called elephantiasis. Okay, we'll have a picture later. Next can also cause what we call chyluria, because again, your worms reside in the lymphatic system. They can reside in the lymphatic system in the lower, lower lymphatics. It can lead to the rupture of your lymphatic vessels, which leads to the incorporation of your lymph fluid, okay, into urine, okay, which leads to a milky appearance of urine known as chyluria. Okay, chyle. When you say chyle, may siya ang prefix. Chyle refers to lymph, okay, so milky fluid. Alright, chyle. Chyluria, uria meaning found in urine. Okay, so chyle plus uria, chyluria. So lymph found in urine, milky fluid or milky appearance of urine. And lastly, we have, this is chyluria, diba? So you can see brush siya, bukong shuas, charot. Okay, bukong shake pala, charot. Okay. And hydrocele, when they reside in the lymphatic vessels near the reproductive organs of males, they resort to hydrocele, a fluid-filled sac in the scrotum. So here's an example again, hydrocele. Medyo, yes, lumubag. Okay. Alright, and in endemic tropical regions, patients in endemic tropical regions, they experience what we call tropical pulmonary eosinophilia, meaning increased eosinophils, allergic reactions, that happens when the worms migrate in the pulmonary blood vessels. So the adult or the microfilaria worms will invade your pulmonary blood vessels. They lead to allergic reactions, hypersensitivity reactions. That's known now as tropical pulmonary eosinophilia. And in this disease, the antibody that is increased is your IgE. Ayan, IgE. Basta mga allergies, IgE ang increased, guys, na antibodies. Please take note. Basta mga allergy. O, diba? Allergy. IgE antibodies. Okay, very advanced na. Immunosero na to. Okay, alright. So that's for your Wuchereria bancrofti. Alright, okay, now we go now to its appearance. Ayan, so this is the microfilaria of your Wuchereria bancrofti. So as you can see, this is the tail, diba? As you can see, wala siyang abot until the tip. Okay? So, wala siya. Wuchereria, wala siyang nucleus sa tail. Sa tip sa tail. Alright? Sorry naman, pasensya na, no? If you don't want my mnemonics, then don't. Eddie, don't. Okay. Alright. Ayan. And as you can see, this is the sheath, meaning na siya covering. Okay? Outline of the sheath, as you can see here. Okay, that's the microfilaria of Wuchereria bancrofti. And this is an example of elephantiasis. As you can see, diba, naghubang siya, pero siya hupong, pero intense na hupong. So this is the lymph that has accumulated in the sides of your tissues, diba? And there is a kilid. That's why it looked like an elephant's foot. Okay, ang uban na kayo mag-crust pa diri, no? Fibrosis, no? Mag-crusty ang appearance. So it looks similar to an elephant's leg. That's why it's called an elephantiasis. Alright, so lower lymphatics. Lower. Okay, lower lymphatics. Okay, alright. Now that's for Wuchereria bancrofti, our first filarial worm. Now for our next worm, life cycle pa pala, sorry. Okay, for the life cycle, of course, as mentioned, diba? This is the infective stage, L3 larva. Okay, so the mosquito takes a blood meal in a patient and a susceptible host. So pag paak niya, when the mosquito bites, it also injects the infective larva into the patient's body. And inside the patient's body, the larva now becomes adults in the lymphatics. They may produce the microfilaria. The microfilaria goes into the blood vessels. And when another mosquito bites the patient, it now gets the microfilaria, which is now again the infective stage to the mosquito. Alright? And the microfilaria inside the mosquito's body will become L1 larva, L3 larva lang pala. Di na siya mabutog adults kaysa humans siya ngayong adults di ay. Sorry. Okay, so until L3 larva into the salivary glands of your mosquito, and then the cycle goes on and on. So same lagyan po siya with the rest of your filarial species. Okay, or filarial worms. Again, the difference lang is the vectors and the areas in the body as to where the worms will invade or will become adults. Alright? Okay. Okay. Right. So that's for Wuchereria bancrofti. Now we go to Brugia malayi. Ayan. So the second filarial worm. For Brugia malayi, by the name itself, the other name is a Malayan filarial worm and Brugia filariasis. It shows nocturnal periodicity, same again with your Brugia. The vectors Again, so the same mosquitoes, Aedes, Anopheles, and Mansonella, nocturnal. So if kanina mga mosquitoes, or if these species of mosquitoes transmit the Brugia malayi worm, they exhibit nocturnal periodicity. But if it uses the vector Coquiletidia, it's subperiodic. So it's not clear kung when talaga ang kanyang periodicity. Alright? It would depend on the vector. But most of the time, it's nocturnal. Alright? Okay. Ayan. Now for Microfilaria, this time it's sheathed. It's sheathed, pointed tail, and the nuclei is not continuous, but at the tip of the tail, it has two distinct nuclei. Ayan. So, two distinct nuclei. How do I remember? Brugia. Two syllables, Brugia. Or letter B ang nag-start. So, what letter in the alphabet? The second. The second letter in the alphabet. So, meaning it has two nuclei at the tip of the tail. Okay? Brugia. Letter B, second letter in the alphabet. Two nuclei at the tip of the tail. Alright? Sana naman. Okay, I hope that helps. The mnemonics. Okay, and it's also sheathed. Alright. Sheath stains bright pink with gemsa. Ayan. So if we stain the sheath with gemsa, it will be bright pink, or it will stain bright pink. Okay. Another species are Brugia timori. The vector is Anopheles, but the sheath will not be stained by gemsa. Okay, muna yung difference sa Brugia timori and malayi. Brugia timori will not be stained by gemsa, ang iyang sheath. And lastly, Microfilaria tends to be longer, okay, of Brugia timori. So, mas mataas siya. Diba? Mas gusto natin mataas. Charot. Okay. Alright, ayan. The disease is still the same with Wuchereria bancrofti, but for Brugia malayi, the Microfilaria do not reside, or they don't favor the lymphatic vessels near the genitals. Okay? So they like the upper lymphatics. So ganun sila sa taas. So top sila. Charot. Gusto nila ang upper lymphatics. So how do I remember pa rin? Letter B, di ba? Kaysa W. Letter B, mas mauna ang W. Letter B. The letter B comes first kaysa letter W. So that's why ang letter B, that's the upper, Brugia malayi, and Wuchereria siya ang lower. Okay? So that's how I remember. Mga mnemonics lang. Okay? So Brugia malayi, two distinct nuclei at the tip of the tail. How do I remember? Brugia, or letter B, di ba? Second letter in the alphabet. So two nuclei at the tip of the tail. And what lymphatic system, what lymphatic vessels do they reside in? Okay, for Brugia, upper lymphatics, and for Wuchereria, lower lymphatics. How do I remember? Brugia, letter B, diba? And Wuchereria, W. So, letter B comes first, so Brugia, so siya ang sa upper, okay, and letter W comes second, siya ang lower. Okay. Alright, okay, I hope it helps. Okay, or effective to siya na mnemonics. Okay, alright. Ayan, okay, so that's for Brugia malayi. The clinical disease is faster. It's faster. It progresses faster than Wuchereria bancrofti. Okay, and here's an example of a picture. As you can see, di ba? This is the pink staining sheath. As you can see, di ba? Para siyang, meron siya ka ng casing sa longganisa ganyan, or sa hotdog. Inana ang appearance sa sheath, or that's how I like to think about it. It's a covering. Okay, so, ayan, sheath. Di ba? As you can see, it's stained pink. And as you can see, these are two nuclei at the tail. Di ba? 1, 2. So, that's how you remember. And as you can see, di ba, ang nuclei niya, dears, it's not continuous, meaning di siya sunod-sunod na parehas sa Wuchereria na in one straight line talaga. As you can see, the nucleus are parang clumped together. Okay, so bubot siya. Okay, alright, they're clumped together. They're not continuous, like in one straight line. Okay, alright, that's for Brugia malayi. Okay, now for life cycle, also the same with your Wuchereria bancrofti. So, same with Wuchereria bancrofti. Okay. Alright. Now, we then compare the two because again, diba, they have the same disease. Alright. And they're quite similar with each other. So that's their differences and characteristics. So for movement, Wuchereria is graceful and smooth. Wow, yes. Virgin, conservative, graceful. But for Brugia malayi, ayan, kinky, stiff appearance. So, dili siya dancer. So, medyo gahing ang lawas. Okay? For nuclei, for Wuchereria, as mentioned, it's not overlapping. So, it's really continuous, one by one, no? Straight lang yun. Makitaan ang nucleus. You can see the nucleus one by one. But for Brugia malayi, it's overlapping. Diba? Pareha sa picture ganyan. Like in the picture before, in the previous slide, diba, the nuclei are overlapping. They look clumped, no? Or they look kanang clog, diba? So para silang gaguot, mura sila gaguot. Okay? Alright. For sheath, Wuchereria is sheath-fed and same with Brugia. But for terminal nuclei, di ba, Wuchereria, wala siyang nuclei, terminal nuclei. And for Brugia, it has 2, okay, in the tip of the tail. Alright, I hope. Okay na, nag-gets na. Alright. And for the 2 worms, the treatment of choice is diethyl carbamazine. Or also known as your DEC. DEC. DEC, diethyl carbamazine. The treatment of choice for the 2 worms. Okay, I think, and for the rest of filarial worms, if I'm not mistaken, it's DEC, diethyl carbamazine. Okay, please take 2. Bastos. Anyway, Mark. Anyway, alright, okay. Now we go now to the 3rd, which is what we call your Oncocerca volvulus, also known as your convoluted filaria. Okay, the other name is known as your river blindness worm, or also known as your blinding worm. Alright? And the vector is what we call your Simulium SPP, or known as your black fly or buffalo gnat. NAT. Silent letter G. Buffalo gnat. So, yun yung appearance. So, Simulium SPP, black fly. Okay. Alright. That's the vector. Okay. Now, for Microfilaria of your Oncocerca volvulus, it's described as unsheathed, blunt tail, and the nuclei also do not extend to the tip of the tail. So how do I remember? Yes, how do I remember? Oncocerca, di ba? Nasa pangalan na Oncocerca. On, di ba? So baliktad rin, this becomes no, di ba? No sheath, ayan, no sheath, and no terminal nuclei. So no. Oncocerca, on, the first 2 letters, you reverse it or balihon mo siya, no, diba? No sheath, no terminal nuclei. Ayan. So dami ng mnemonics na nasi-share. Oncocerca volvulus. Ayan. Okay. Alright. Now for diagnosis, again, we use skin snips. Ayan. So siya lang different sa rest of filarial worms because the diagnosis or the method of choice talaga for diagnosis for Oncocerca is through skin snips, meaning we get sample from the skin, so skin snips. Alright, so skin biopsies, and then we stain that in GemSam. Okay, alright, because again, your Oncocerca volvulus, they reside in the subcutaneous tissues. Okay, so the Microfilaria can also be found there. Okay, alright. So the Microfilaria may be occasionally lang found in urine or blood, and may also be visible in the cornea. But most of the time, they are in subcutaneous tissues, mga nodules. Mara siya mga burot-burot. Okay? Burot-burot. There will be like nodules on the skin. And the nodules will now contain the Microfilaria. Okay. Alright. Ayan. So for the disease, also known as river blindness or onchocerciasis, considered to be the 2nd major cause of blindness in the world. I don't know the first. Basing cataract, I'm not sure. Okay, pero 2nd major cause on onchocerciasis, ayan, subcutaneous nodule formation, also known as your onchocercoma. Okay, and enlargement of the lymph nodes that may result in the condition known as hanging groin that may develop into hernia. So when you say hernia, there is a weakening in the tissues, dira, and then another organ will perforate the tissue. So example, intestine ba ma-perforate diri sa scrotum because of a weakening in the barriers, whatever, diba? So that's a hernia. Okay. Alright. And inflammation causes the skin, which causes itching, long-term damage to the skin, and will lead to an appearance described as leopard skin. Leopard skin appearance. Ayan. So, looks like leopard. So, may mga pantal-pantal. Okay? There will be like mga bruises and all that. Okay. Alright. That's for Oncocerca volvulus. Again, the other name is convoluted filaria. Now, why is it called river blindness? It's because this Simulium SPP, they lay their eggs. Okay, they lay their eggs in the river. Okay, so then diba, buffaloes, they like to stay in the river, diba, if makakita na mo. Alright. So that's why it's also called buffalo gnats. Okay, so the flies, no, Simulium SPP, they live and breed, nagpadaghan sila sa river. That's why river blindness siya. Okay, the vector comes from the river. Okay, alright. And usually, diba, there are a lot of rural villages living near the river. So, makuha dyan nila ang vectors, or the vectors can infect the people living near the river. Okay, that's why it's called river blindness. Okay. Alright, now here's an example of your filarial worm of Oncogenica volvulus, diba? The tail, as you can see, it does not contain any nuclei, and as you can see, walang covering, diba? Walang covering. So it's not sheathed. So Oncogenica, no. Okay. Alright, and this is your river blindness, as you can see. There's parang the worm, no, as you can see in the cornea, and this is your hanging groin. The name is hanging groin talaga siya. Okay. Alright, that's for Oncogenica volvulus. Okay, your river blindness, worm, vector, Cybolium sp. Alright. Next, we go to your life cycle. Okay. Nagmamadali. Okay, so life cycle, so the same, black fly, L3 larva enters the bite wound, and the worm will reside in the subcutaneous tissues. They become adults, and then the Microfilaria also are produced in the skin. And when the black fly again ingests or takes another bite, so makuha niya ang Microfilaria, so the same, becomes a larva inside the mosquito, and then of course the cycle goes on. So the difference lang is that the worms do not reside, the Microfilaria cannot be recovered in blood but in your subcutaneous tissues. That's why the specimen of choice is your skin snips. So we get sample from the skin. Okay, alright, ayan. That's for Oncogenica volvulus. Okay. Next, we go on to loa. Okay. Loa, also known as your African eye worm. Okay. The vector is known as your Chrysops spp, also known as your fruit fly, mango fly, tabanid fly, or your deer fly. So here's an example of a picture. Again, looks like a bee, diba? But this is your fruit fly or tabanid fly, or your deer fly. Okay. Alright. Now, siya lang ang nag-exhibit of diurnal periodicity, meaning in the morning, 10:15 a.m. to 2:15 p.m. Diba? Very specific yung shift, okay? Diurnal periodicity. So, in the morning siya daghan in the system. The Microfilaria is sheathed, pointed tail, but the sheath does not stain with gemsa. And there is a distinct continuous row that extends to the tip of the tail, ang nuclei. So, until the tip. So, loa, that's how I remember. Loa, diba? Longest west, loa. So you can say it continuously. Alright, so the nuclei also will be found, or it's continuous until the tip of the tail. Okay, alright. So for diagnosis, definitive diagnosis is the identification of the worms that you can see in the eye. That's really moving, that's migrating in the eye. Or also Microfilaria in the peripheral blood. So the disease is called Filariasis. Infection again, it's identified when you see adult worms in the eyes of the patient. Okay, because the infections may be asymptomatic for years, and it can also cause what we call calabar or fugitive swelling. So na yung mga hubag-hubag sa face. Okay, they're swelling the face because of byproduct sa parasite. Okay, so the byproducts of parasite of the loa in the eyes, no, will then react with the surrounding tissues, which leads to swelling. Okay, so maghubag-hubag, calabar swelling. Okay, alright. And also for mga severe complications, you have immune-mediated encephalopathy, nephropathy, and cardiomyopathy. So sa brain, kidneys, and sa heart. Okay, alright. Ayan. So here's an example of loa. So as you can see, it's sheathed, and the tail goes until the tip of the tail. Okay. Alright, and this is an example of a adult loa in the eye, and you have calabar swelling. So as you can see, there is swelling, hubag-hubag. Okay? Alright, as you can see, loa doesn't cause blindness. Okay? It's just there migrating. So it's just like moving there. But it does not really cause blindness. So basta mag-think mo ba, like, eye worm siya, but it does not cause blindness, or it's not, wala na mention ng blindness. Yes, because again, it's just there to reside or just to migrate, and it's usually the defining feature or the identification that you have loa, it's because there is a worm that's moving in your eye. Okay, unlike for Oncogenica volvulus, it really causes blindness because the worms in a way attacks your eyes, no? So muna siyang ma-blind ka. Okay, because it's subcutaneous tissues man ang ilahang a target. Okay, but for loa, it just resides in the eye. Okay, it doesn't cause harm in a way to the eye, or if it does cause harm, it's not that intensive that it will cause blindness. Okay, alright. So because again, it's still found in the blood. Alright, and nag-migrate lang siya sa imong eye. Okay, that's loa. Alright, and for the life cycle, ayan. So the same, Chrysops, no, takes blood. Again, the adults, the larva, again, infective larva, is deposited in your body, becomes adults, release the microfilaria, again, found in your spinal fluid, whatever. So it migrates to different areas of your body, including your eye na. But again, it doesn't cause blindness. Okay? Alright, ayan. Tapos, still the same life cycle with the rest. So when another chrysops fly bites or takes a meal, it gets the microfilaria and then becomes larvae, L3 larva inside the chrysops fly, and then the cycle goes on. Alright, okay, that's for Loa African eyeworm. Okay, because again, it's usually found in Africa. Okay, so if you're from Africa, why are you white? Charot, okay. Mean girls, charot, okay. And the last species are your Mansonella species. Your Mansonella species are generally not attributed, or it's not associated with any serious infections. And the vector is your Culicoides species, or pwede po na midge. Okay? Your Culicoides species or midge. So it's an example of Culicoides species. You have different species of Mansonella. You have Streptocerca. For Streptocerca, always take note lang that the nuclei extends to the tip and then the tail is bent, similar to a shepherd's crook. Ayan, please take note there sa malabas. Shepherd's crook tail is found or is seen in Mansonella streptocerca. But if shepherd's crook virus, shepherd's crook na virus, alright, sino yan? This is your Marburg virus. Ako lumalabas ang words din. Shepherd's crook, your Marburg virus. Okay, alright, ayan. But for parasites, Mansonella streptocerca. Okay, shepherd's crook. So here's an example. Yung tail niya is bent, it's similar to a shepherd's crook. So this is the shepherd's crook. Meaning, katong ginagamit ng murag tungkod, or like para siyang staff, the staff of your shepherds. Okay, those that guide the sheep. Ayan, shepherd's crook. Alright, another species, you have Mansonella perstans, which resides in your pericardial, pleural, and peritoneal cavities, and blood is considered to be the specimen of choice. And lastly, for Microfilaria for perstans, it's unsheathed, and numerous nuclei extend also to the tip of the tail. For Mansonella ozardi, common name is New World Filaria. The difference now is that it can also use Cymulum spp. Asan ang Cymulum spp? That's for Oncogenica volvulus, di ba? So it can also use that vector. Use Cymulum spp as a vector. Okay. Alright, and for Microfilaria of Mansonella ozardi or Ozard's filariasis, similar appearance with O. volvulus, but it can be found in blood rather than skin snips. Diba? Oncogenica volvulus, you can see it in skin snips. Alright, okay. So that's for the Mansonella species. Ayan. Unsheathed, numerous nuclei, but it does not extend to the tip of the tail. Alright, okay. Ayan. So that's for Mansonella species. Now we go into the summary. Ayan. So as you can see, let's look at the habitat. For the rest, it's mostly lymphatics. For subcutaneous, kinsa na mga subcutaneous, you have Oncogenica, Loa, and also Mansonella streptocerca. For ozardi and perstans, it's usually body cavities. Okay. For vector, as you can see, it's different. Again, Mansonella ozardi can use Cymulum spp, similar to Oncogenica volvulus. For specimen, most of the time it's blood, but for Oncogenica and Mansonella streptocerca, it's skin snips. Okay. For periodicity, again, nocturnal, Wuchereria, and Brugia. Diurnal, si Loa, the rest is non-periodic, meaning it can be found any time of the day within the blood system or within the blood of the patient. Okay? Alright. Microfilaria tail, again, Wuchereria, wala siyang nuclei. Brugia, 2 distinct nuclei at the tail. Oncogenica do not extend to the tip of the tail. Loa, continuous until the tip of the tail. Mansonella ozardi do not extend to the tip. You have Mansonella perstans extend to the tip of the tail. And for streptocerca, with nuclei po siya. And for sheathed, inside sheathed, Wuchereria, Brugia, and Loa ang sheathed. So, Wuchereria, Brugia, and Loa ang sheathed. The rest is unsheathed. Okay. And again, sa notes ni Mabernal, na po rin siya table. So, very easy then to remember. Okay, alright. Now, we go now to this algorithm or parang flowchart. Diba? Gusto natin mga flowcharts. Flowchart that was found or that was suggested or was found written in Bailey and Scott's na Diagnostic Microbiology na book. And this is the flowchart. So as you can see, very easy lang to comprehend here. No? So example, you isolated a microfilaria from your host. So the next thing that we look at is the sheath. Okay, so if it's present, diba? Again, we call it mga microfilaria na may sheath. It's either Buchyridia lang, Brugia, or Loa-Loa. Alright, it's only the three of them. Alright, so let's say the sheath is present, so we look at the nuclei. Now, if the nuclei, walay nuclei sa tip, do not extend to the tip, diba? So wala, so that's Buchyridia bancrofti. Okay, now, that's again, Buchyridia bancrofti do not extend to the tip of the tail, ang nuclei, but it's sheathed. Okay, that's at one end. Now, on the other end, if it extends to the tip, we then look if it's continuous row, okay, that continuous row, like, sunod-sunod yun until the end, then that's Loa-Loa, diba, continuous. But if it's not continuous, and you only have two nuclei at the tip, then that's Brugia, o diba, very easy lang, okay, Brugia. Now, let's say if the sheath is absent, so kinsa to mga walay sheath or unsheathed, so Oncogenica and Mansonella species, okay. So if the sheath is absent, we look now at the nuclei. If there's no nuclei, alright, in the tail, so it's Oncogenica volvulus, diba? No sheath, no nuclei, okay? Alright. Now, on the other end, if it has a nuclei, we then look if it extends to the tip or not. So if it does not extend to the tip, it's Mansonella ozardi, and if it extends to the tip, you have Mansonella perstans or Mansonella streptocerca. And Mansonella streptocerca, again, characteristic shape of the tail is bent, similar to a shepherd's crook. Ayan. So I think that's very much easier to identify, diba? So I hope nag-gets lang. Alright, and it's very easy to comprehend it. Okay, alright. Ayan. Now, diba? So for the next video, we'll now look into your hemoflagellates. I'm sure that you are already a master of this. You already know this because again, you're done with this in the lecture. So review na lang ni siya, supplementary mga information siguro. Alright, so medyo marami tayong na-chika sa filarial nematodes actually. I think it's the longest video, but maybe ang malaria talaga mas mataas. But anyway, oh my gosh, Mark. Alright, so on the next video, again, I'll see you on the next video and we'll lecture, or we'll start now with your hemoflagellates.